All right, let's take a look at the big board right now. Investors reacting after the latest jobs report showing U.S. employers added 57,000 jobs in June. That's far below forecasts from analysts, but you see the market reacting up 594 points today. Let's take a look at our interactive stock market heat map brought to you by FinViz, showing the top 500 stocks. A nice mix of red and green, mostly green though today. Let's go live down with CBS News producer Emily Pandise. Emily, great to be with you. What do you make of today's jobs numbers?
Hey, Elizabeth. So today's report was a completely fine jobs report, right? As you mentioned, that 57,000 jobs fell short of economists' expectations. But listen, growth is growth, and it's still higher than the average jobs added each month over the past 12 months, which is about 36,000 jobs. And, you know, given everything that's been going on in the macroeconomic environment, we're still dealing with tariffs, we're dealing with a war in Iran, we're dealing with those high oil and gas prices. Given all of that, the fact that the economy added 57,000 jobs is still a good sign. One thing I do want to pay attention to in this report here, though, is that for the first time in a while, wages have not kept pace with inflation. So inflation last month, we know, popped a little bit, 4.2%, driven by some of those high energy costs. And average hourly wages only rose 3.5%. So all those people out there we've been seeing for a long time, that consumer sentiment is not great. People don't feel good about the economy. And that's where some of that tension is coming in, is the discrepancy between how much you're taking home in your paycheck and how much you're paying at the store on those higher prices. Elizabeth?
And Emily, what could this mean for interest rates in the near future, talking about affordability?
You know, investors are still expecting rates to hold steady, maybe a hike or two later in the year. You know, inflation has been going up. Bringing interest rates up as well is one way to help tame that inflation. But if the jobs picture continues as it's going, or perhaps gets a little bit worse, that's when we'll see the Fed maybe start to reconsider holding rates steady, and perhaps even if the job situation gets bad enough, perhaps even cut. But I don't know that that's in the cards for the rest of the year. We'll have to kind of wait and see where things go. And also, Fed Chair Kevin Warsh has talked about different ways to get inflation under control beyond just raising rates. So we'll have to see what he and the rest of the Federal Reserve Board decides in the coming months. Elizabeth?
Emily Pandise, great to be with you. Thanks so much for that. Okay, let's bring in CBS News political reporter Zach Hudak. Zach, how is the Trump administration framing the weaker than expected jobs report here?
Liz, they are, as you could expect them, trying to frame this as a glass half full, not half empty situation. They were zeroing in on the positives, which is there was still job creation. It's just that the rate of job growth has slowed. So they're pointing to that. They're pointing to the stable rate of unemployment. And they're saying, look, there are jobs. Why don't folks go out and take them? Here's, we heard earlier from White House Economic Council Director Kevin Haslett. Here's what he had to say.
There are millions and millions of job openings, and so if people are frustrated, they got frustrated maybe because of Joe Biden's economy and left the labor market, they should come back in because there are jobs everywhere.
So it's sort of a scenario where they're almost putting the onus on those who are unemployed. I don't know how that will play politically, but they're basically saying, look, the jobs are available. The unemployment is not our problem. That really doesn't change the fact, though, that the rate has slowed, and on its face, these are not positive numbers for the administration. So they will need to continue to do this kind of messaging on this to counter this, particularly going into a midterm year when many frontline members of Congress are going to be attached to the job numbers that the administration has overseen here.
Zach, I want to pivot now to the war with Iran. We know the talks with Iran are on hold for at least a week for Iran's funeral commemorations for the late Ayatollah. But what's the overall sense of how negotiations are going up until this point?
The latest messaging we're getting, Liz, is that they're positive. We heard the president say that there is positive progress. We heard from the Qataris that there's been progress, from the Pakistanis that there's been progress, and those have been key allies working as mediators for us and Iran. So in some ways, that is a good sign. The reality of the situation is that we remain in technically a ceasefire, but we continue to have flare-ups. We continue to negotiate without any clear this has been agreed to, substantive measures that have been publicly stated by both sides. So in a lot of ways, we're in this Groundhog Day cycle where we keep going back and forth between deadlines, threats to restart the fighting, as we heard from Vice President J.D. Vance today. And then we go into a ceasefire again, as long as it seems like the talks are positive. The former National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, had something to say on this earlier today.
Iran is the one making the progress in these negotiations because they're receiving big paychecks. I mean, the Qataris are about to unfreeze $6 billion of assets.
So I think the point there is that before this conflict started, there wasn't discussions of unfreezing those Iranian assets. And in fact, there weren't discussions of any kind of Iranian oversight of the Strait of Hormuz. So in a lot of ways, Iran is in a stronger position and the U.S. is in a weaker position. I think the way the administration would respond, though, and the way the president has responded to those criticisms in the past, is to say, had we not intervened, Iran would have been on their way to a nuclear weapon, and that is a situation we simply cannot allow.
Zach Hudak, thanks so much.